Hello, friends. Welcome to Logistics of Logistics. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is Panama, the logistics engine of Latin America, with my friend Demo Perez. How's it going, Demo?
I'm doing great, man.
Good to hear from you again. So, Demo, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
My name is Demostenes Perez, but I'm better known as Demo. I'm calling today from Panama, and I work for IPL Group, a 3PL company based in Panama.
Aren't you one of the founders of IPL Group?
Yes, I'm one of the co-founders of IPL Group, and I serve as a Chief Commercial Officer.
So what does IPL Group do in Panama?
Basically, we serve global companies, their regional distribution center for developing the Latin American markets. These companies bring their goods in Panama, basically the free trade zone in the Atlantic side of Panama. They bring those inventories, and then we manage all the sales orders and fulfillment processes to fulfill their orders or the commercial sales orders to their customers, depending on where in the region, Central America, the Caribbean, or South America.
Yep. And so you mentioned those regions. You said Central America, South America, or the Caribbean.
And the Caribbean.
Yeah. And I know in the past I've interviewed you and talked to you a lot about way back when I was still doing digital marketing. I helped you guys start your website. So I learned a lot about your business back then. But when we talk about Central America, South America, and the Caribbean, sometimes it's also just called Latin America. So I think we can, and Latin America, I think would also include Mexico, which is North America.
Yes. In our business, we typically serve, Mexico is not on the equation 100% of the times because it's too big. It's a self-serve market, as well as the South Cone in South America, meaning Brazil, that is also served by themselves. Ecuador, Uruguay, and Argentina. Even though we have services to those countries, those are not very common markets because, again, due to the destination, the transit times, and the size of those populations, those are served typically from that part. So if we see a Latin American map, we serve typically all over from Guatemala to Chile, all the countries and the islands.
Since we're not all familiar, just name some of the big countries you serve.
The biggest countries, the biggest market for us is Colombia, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Peru, Guatemala, Costa Rica. So those are the main markets we serve in terms of volume. Of course, we serve all the other markets, but those markets, due to the population and how business is managed, for sure, those are our big customers.
Yep. And I think while we're talking about it, one of the challenges, and you can please elaborate on this, one of the challenges with serving that region is there are not always free trade agreements between every country. Every country has different regulations. So if I'm a U.S. manufacturer wanting to serve that region, or if I'm from Europe or I'm from Asia, one country might say, we need this tag on it and this paperwork. And the other is going to say, no, we need this tag and this paperwork. So you can do that all back in the U.S. where you don't understand the specific requirements of the region, or you hire someone like Demo and the IPL Group who says, nope, we do this every day. Not only do we deliver every day, but we know what the requirements are for that country.
Yeah. And just to add on, that's not the only challenge. The challenge is that those requirements are changing.
Yes.
So
of course.
It's not the 100% rule, but it will depend on how that specific country is moving politically. Depending on who's taking the administration, those requirements will change. So that's the main challenge. If you know the requisites of the country, it's okay. You can feel that from your manufacturing points. But the problem is that change that make these companies go nuts, right?
And it's not just the federal or the governmental regulations. It's also the requirements of the customer. So there's different holidays and different sales. So one country might say, oh, we want this tag because of, one retailer might say, we want our tag in it. And you can, again, do that from your home country, which might be the United States or England. Or you can say, I'm going to ask Demo and those guys down in Panama to do it. Probably they understand the region better, for one, but they also, the culture is better, but also they do this every day. This is their business.
Yeah, and that also have other implications. For example, different countries, we celebrate Mother's Day in a different day. Not all the countries have the same Mother's Day celebration, or the school time. Vacations is different depending on the country. So all those elements will affect in how the goods will be sent, if we need to create bundles for specific products. So all these differences, cultural differences, affect how the products are distributed on this region.
Yep. And I know a lot of times when I talk to you, you'll talk about the different changes in the governments and the region. And I remember many years ago, you told me your sales were down. And I said, why were they down? This wasn't at IPL Group. This is the company you used to work at. And you said, oh, they're just down. I said, well, what country is not shipping? You said, oh, Venezuela. And I said, what's going on with Venezuela? You go, oh, they're just not ordering the stuff. I said, somebody else has it. There's always public record on the shipping. So you said to me, no, they're not getting that stuff anymore. I said, what is it? You go, just toilet paper, peanut butter, so, and I was like, oh, wait, what's going on there? And then it was years later that I started to hear about the challenges they were having there.
You have a great memory, man. Yeah, Venezuela.
Well, that, by the way, that struck me when I heard that there's a country that no longer receives toilet paper and peanut butter.
Yeah. Actually, years ago, Venezuela was the number one market for us, with a very big chunk of the exports, of the re-exports out of Panama. After all what happened there, now they are probably position 14, 15 in the list. Even though it's a huge country, a big population, but with all the challenges they are having, sometimes they have some peaks recently. But again, it's not as big as it was, let's say, 10 years ago.
You got to get them back on track, Demo.
I will.
So,
I hope so.
One other thing, we've talked about this before. A lot of countries, I'm wrong way to say it, a lot of companies here in the U.S. work with you in Panama, work with Panama companies. We'll get into why in a minute. But others will say, oh, no, we'll just work with Miami. They can do the same thing. And I know they can, and they do. But you told me there's some real advantages to working with Panama as opposed to Miami. Please talk about those for a minute.
Yeah, many companies prefer using Miami for mainly two reasons. The first is that it's U.S. territory, of course. And the second, the volume of consolidation they found for the market. The downside of using Miami is the cost. Again, it's U.S. territory, right? So the main challenge we have found with customers that are been moving down to Panama is real estate is going very high. Human resources,
Miami's expensive.
It is very expensive. And in every day, and this is after a research with our partners there, finding a forklift driver is not easy. Not only the cost per hour, which is pretty high, is probably 3 times than Panama, but the problem is that they couldn't find it because there are many other activities these guys prefer to do instead of being in the warehouse. This is a big challenge for many companies now, reaching good and trained people to serve these operations. Yeah, we have found that more and more companies are looking south and to see how they can streamline operations, reduce costs, reduce transit times, and give a better service to their customers in this region.
Right. Now, Miami is a little closer to some of the Caribbean countries, but those are not the biggest markets you serve. So Panama has a big cost advantage, and you're closer. So for people not looking at a map right now, Demo, please explain where Panama is.
Panama is just in the middle of the Americas continent and is the narrowest point of the continent. Is the link between, let's say, North America and South America. Actually, Panama is the only place where the continent is divided by the land, right? Because of the canal. It's the only place that you can cross the continent by a bridge, right? That make Panama a very unique place for every logistics or commerce operation.
Yep. Demo, let's talk for a minute about the history of Panama. Years ago, you asked me to read a book. It was so long ago, I listened to it on Kindle, and it was about the history of Panama, but it was very interesting. Give us a quick history of Panama for those who are not involved in that kind of shipping in that region.
That book was The Path Between the Seas, David McCulloch.
Yeah. Oh, say that one more time. What was it called?
The Path Between the Seas by David McCulloch.
Okay.
Great writer and a beautiful note, and hope listeners can look for it. And it's a very interesting book. A lot of history there. But basically, Panama starting to be a distribution center since the 600 years ago when the Spanish colony started, because they found that indeed was the narrowest part of the continent, so they can cross what they found in South America, mainly Peru, silver and gold, and they found that the best way to cross from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean to go to Spain with those products was through Panama. So they built these roads at a time to cross by ox carts the country and part by boats. There were some activities there created during those days for not only crossing but also to do trading. There were some fairs called the Portobello fairs that were very big exchange places, not far from where we are right now, the Free Zone in Cologne, where many products from Asia, Europe were exchanged from the products they get in America, in the new continents. Those roads were there, and actually, the first idea of building a canal came from the Spanish in those days. They were trying to find a way to cross all the country by boats instead of the ox carts.
So, how big does the canal have to be to how many miles?
You crossing basically, I think it's 55 miles.
So there's always been this little strip of land, and it looks very small on a map, but it's 55 miles across. And the challenge is, if you don't stop on the Pacific side and take it by ox cart or train or truck, it's 55 miles. That's why we made the canal. But there was a lot of attempts to make the canal prior to. So if you don't do that, if you don't ship across Panama or the area that was Colombia at that time, you had to go all the way around South America, which is what, an extra 10 days if you.
And not only the extra time, but the dangers of doing that, crossing near to the South Pole. So it's very expensive, a lot of time, and the lack of resources on those areas at those times. So it was pretty hard. I believe they never did it on those days because of some tragedies. And Panama was the solution for the problem, and based on those ideas of building something to cross faster, it came the first intention that was having a railroad that was actually created by an American company. And the idea came because there was the same problem in the U.S. crossing the mail. California was booming on the gold rush, and they need to cross mail and people from the West Coast to the East Coast, because in New York at that time were the center of everything. All the business were in New York, but the gold was in California. So crossing the United States land, you had the Apaches and all those challenges. So crossing that mail through Panama was easier, using the same path used by the Spanish, part by the river, the Sagres River, and another part by the ox carts. So that's where the first concept of building the railroad, and they built the railroad back in 1855. Actually, very interesting point. The same path of that railroad is the actual Panama Canal Railroad. Same path. Very cool.
So still there.
Yeah, it's still there, and it's pretty efficient. It's now across containers, not mail anymore. But after that, then came the first big intention of building a canal that was led by the French, a guy called Ferdinand de Lesseps, that was actually the builder of the Suez Canal. So he came to Panama trying to build the same thing that he did in Egypt, but was a complete different thing. Rainforest, all what the tropics brings, and the difference in the levels. So they couldn't make it, and they lost a lot of money. It's a very long story, filled with tragedy and many things involved. It's very interesting just to read about that. And after that, starting in the 19th centuries, the U.S. take the lead in build the canal, what we call today the Panama Canal. That is still there, right? Serving the global commerce.
Yep. And I seem to remember reading that book is they said there wasn't enough money anywhere to make this. And they said lots of people talked about making it. And I believe it was J.P. Morgan JP Morgan, and I think he was the commerce or the finance director of Panama for many years, for 30 years after they built the canal. And you told me that the part of what is Panama used to be Colombia, and they wanted to break free from Colombia, perhaps different culturally or something. And the U.S. was allies with Colombia. Correct me if I go astray. And then Colombia said, no, we're not interested in doing the canal. But then the people who are now in Panama said, we do. And then the U.S. said, hey, maybe we'll be allies with them instead, and said, if you let us build a canal and let us own it for 100 years, we'll help you leave Colombia.
Yes, yes, because after we made the independence from Spain back in 1820, voluntarily joined Colombia because the Gran Colombia at the time was the big country, was the most wealthy country in this region. So Panama voluntarily joined Colombia, but not even 100 years after that, we found out that in those days, Colombia did not give Panama what they promised to Panama, right? So that's why we were trying to make that independence. And the only way Panama, a very poor country at that time, filed was to make this alliance with the U.S. So basically, we get that finance not only for the canal but for other things too. And in that deal came the canal and a piece of land in the middle of the country that became part of the U.S.
Yep. And you said to me that the author of that book was at a party in New York, and somebody said, "Oh, you're from Panama," and he's an attorney in New York, and he said, "Yeah," and they said, "Did you know Panama was founded in a hotel room?" And he mentioned the hotel room down the street in New York, and the guy goes, "No, it wasn't." He goes, "What are you talking about?" It's in that book, and he said there was this whole founding story that they had that was slightly different. And by the way, not the only country in the world where they've rewritten their history.
Yeah, that's a the other book that has those details not on the first one is called How Wall Street Created a Nation by a guy named Ovidio Diaz. He's a Panamanian lawyer that was in New York, and he made very deep research. And the interesting thing of that book is that he documents all the lobby done by John Hay and the senators, and then how a guy from a lobbyer from France was dealing with the senators. It's impressive how that happened more than 100 years ago. No email, no tax.
And so going way back, Panama has U.S. connections. They still use U.S. currency. And it's not the United States, but it's very similar. And that canal 100 years ago, and I just went back, when did it leave U.S. control and go to Panama control?
31 of December 1999.
So for 100 years, the U.S. managed the canal, owned it.
89 years.
Yep, 89 years. And then after that 89 years, Panama's took over control of it. And at the time that was built, it was by far the greatest engineering project in history, probably going all the way back to the pyramids. And we don't even know if we made the pyramids.
Yeah, and that's so interesting because the canal is electric. And General Electric, JP Morgan and all these guys, they bring those guys. And the canal was like a lab for GE. They built several technologies. They tested there. The steel is electric, right? So it's pretty impressive from the engineering standpoint. If you think this was inaugurated in 1914, but the concept came some years before that. When you saw those ships crossing and see how those technologies and those gates operated by a very small engine, how they open and close, it was created 100 years ago. That's impressive from that standpoint.
Yep. And again, without the canal, we wouldn't have trade the way it is today. What is it? 5 or 6% of all trade goes through that canal every year. And when the water level was low, we all had to go back around South America or cross using the bridge. What percentage of people would make the choice to go all the way around South America versus across?
Very few. But the problem of the low levels, the real problem just started last year in 2023 because of La Nina, all these different things. And the water level,
Say that. Would you say, La Nina?
El Nino? and La Nina, this climate phenomena that affects the water, the rains. So we started seeing the problem last year, actually, not this year, last year, when during the rainy season, we didn't have the enough rain to cover the usual levels.
Now, this isn't ocean levels, lake levels, correct? Please explain that to me.
Yeah, to feed the canal in the construction, they create a man-made lake, and that's like a huge water reservoir. When it rains, because the canal is in the middle of a rainforest, right? So all that rain is collected in this reservoir, and that's how. And every time a ship crosses the canal, we need those to take water from those lakes and then put it down out. So when you reach the last lock on the Atlantic or on the Pacific, that water is thrown away, right, to the ocean. So basically, we are throwing away water kept on the lake and then keep it out to the ocean. And just to add on that, the water levels on the canal were lower, and what happened was the canal, to keep water on those reservoirs, to keep managing the levels, they reduced the number of transits. So the canal never closed. Basically, they reduced in a process the number of ships crossing per day. So I think the less amount of ships crossing per day was 22 on the worst part. Now we're back on the 36, and I believe
How many go per day now?
it's 36, 38, based on what I know, because the levels are now back to normal. And now the big challenge for the country is how we cannot avoid or stop those phenomena, right? It will pass more and more, because Panama was not the only one country affected by the water levels. You saw Brazil, the Panama River, you saw Mississippi. Also, many other countries were affected because of those water levels. So what we're thinking here is how we can have another reservoir to have water and then pump from many miles away, pump that water to the actual one. So that's the big discussion here, because it's a very tough discussion, because we need to create another man-made lake, and that will affect people that lives in those areas. So it's a very complex situations to be solved, and that's happening right now. Many people are seeing what will be the best way to do this, but it will take a couple of years. So it's not something that will happen next year.
You guys are used to big engineering projects down there. So let's switch gears and thank you for the history. So getting back to it, the United States has a long history with Panama. So this, even though it is a different country, it does use U.S. currency. People speak English. A lot of people speak English. What percentage of people in Panama speak English? What is 8 million people down there?
No, we are 4.2 million people, very small country. I don't have the exact percentage. I cannot give you that number, but it's pretty high in terms of the culture, as you said. And it's an important fact. Panama is the oldest country in the world using the US dollar as a legal currency. Since 1904 is our legal currency. Even though we have our own currency called the Balboa, but we don't use it because it doesn't exist bills, right? It's just coins.
You don't use U.S. coins. You just use U.S. dollars.
We use both the bills and the coins. But it's fun because the US coins, are the same size and weight than the Panamanian coins. So you can have in your pocket a Panamanian coin and a US coin together, and you can pay with those. We use less coins now, but yeah, you can use both. Fun thing is that when we travel to the US and we go to a vending machine, for example, that vending machine will not take the Panamanian coin, even though it's the same thing. Right? It's fun. That's a fun fact.
So we have close ties to Panama. So we've had a lot of military bases there. There's a lot of U.S. based companies there. It is a foreign country, but it's almost like Canada. Like when you go, it's different, but very much the same.
Yeah, it's very easy to be here, to live here. There's a lot of US expats living in Panama because of the medical system. Some hospitals have ties with US hospitals. So it's easy for them.
Yeah, and remember you talked to me, this was many years ago, pre-COVID, you told me, look at all the U.S. companies moving their Latin America headquarters to Panama. So there's some tax advantages also to being in Panama.
Yeah, that's still happening. Up to date, there are 184 global multinational companies that have moved their Latin American headquarters to Panama. Of course, there are companies from all over the world, but there are many US-based companies in that, because that's a specific legislation for these companies using this model. It's pretty beneficial.
So when we think of serving Latin America, there, or South America, Central America, Caribbean, there are all these different countries. So it's almost like you guys are a distribution center that they can do the value add stuff. So if I was selling shoes here and I was a US company, I might say, have a distribution center in Houston that serves these markets. You guys are almost that same DC, except you're for a region as opposed to just a country. So that's a good way to look at Panama. Am I right to say that?
Yeah, it's completely exactly the same. We do the same systems that they are using in the US, same metrics, same processes, same everything. The difference is on those value add activities. Then we need to make those specific thing by country that probably are not done in the US.
Oh, no, it's the value add and the local knowledge is absolutely required. And also, Panama is, I could do that stuff here, but Panama has a lower cost too, right?
Yeah. The cost is way less in different facts. First is the cost of transportation, because if you're manufacturing somewhere in Asia Pacific, in China, you have direct ships coming to Panama to the canal. Panama will be typically the first point of contact of those ships coming to America. That reduces transit times, and as you said, crossing Panama is pretty fast. The time that will take moving a container that was unloaded on a port in the Pacific and then sent by truck to the Atlantic is a couple of hours. How long it will take from LA to New York?
You told me this one time that you listened to my podcast. You said, I like it because I get in my car on the Pacific coast and I drive to work on the Atlantic coast and I hear one episode. I said, wait a sec, how far is that?
Yeah, it actually happens every day still. It's a 55-minute drive that I do every day, going to my office that is the Atlantic side. And I did that recently on a bike.
Very
I
nice.
crossed the country in a bike with my wife. Very cool.
Yeah, great. Let's talk about a few things new going on in Panama. So again, Panama is a perfect place to distribute your goods across Latin America. And a lot of times when we're talking, I'm just mentioning the example of shoes. If I got shoes, let's say I'm a shoe company and I say I'm going to have those shoes, they're made in Vietnam and now they're shipped to LA or Long Beach. I could say, okay, I'll ship those from LA, Long Beach down to Miami. It'll take a few days. Or I could say, keep those shoes on the Pacific Ocean, and rather than go to LA, Long Beach, take them down to Panama. I would save a lot of days. Plus, it's cheaper. Plus, I'm going to get unloaded a lot faster in Panama than I'm going to get unloaded in Long Beach, LA. Talk about that advantage that you have working with some of your American companies that you distribute their products in.
Yeah, and the shoes example that you picked is a pretty cool one, because we do a lot of shoes right now in IPL, and we receive indeed from Vietnam, Bangladesh, and other countries.
Oh, I guessed right.
Yeah. Our customers basically avoid, because American companies, they have DCs in the US, but the US is for the US market, which is huge, and they have all that structure working. But in Latin America, you are fighting against different situations. It's not the same economic power, so you need to have very low cost, able to compete, right? So yeah, we have many ships coming from Vietnam. Let's use Vietnam as an example. On the weekly basis, probably 5 or 6 ships coming on the weekly basis directly to Panama from Vietnam, right? Ho Chi Minh, Panama, that's a very common route. So we will get those containers from products. We will unload it pretty fast. They will, depending if the ship stops in the Pacific or the ship stops on the Atlantic. There is no rule for that, right? Shipping lines will stop anywhere. There is no, because you go from the Pacific, will stop on the Pacific. No, that doesn't exist. It will depend, they change. There are ports in the Pacific, ports in the Atlantic. Take that container out of the port. For us, it takes less than an hour. Being on the warehouse take a couple of minutes instead of what you got in LA, Long Beach, or in other ports in the US. So the thing is that after 48 hours of that ship arrived to Panama, that product will be ready to be re-exported to another country in the region. And probably we will get a booking for those 48 hours, 72 hours. We're not shipping the same container. We're not shipping the same goods. We are mixing those products. Vietnam products from Chinese products, from Central American products, big brands that we serve, they mix it, they consolidate different products. So what we do is that we prepare the orders for the stores. We make all the runs, sizes, colors, depending promotions, whatever they need. We prepare that, and that it's happening in a very short period of time. So probably when the product that was shipped out of Panama arrived on the destination market, that container, if we're sent to the US, we're still on the road to Miami, or the products are on the warehouse in Miami. Yeah, that's the main point. So the company, when they discover that they can do it faster, cheaper, safely, and so they start gaining market share. They have more satisfied customers because they are moving faster, and they can mix again small quantities because we don't always ship full containers. We do a lot of LCL of mixing products. Those shoes with the polo shirts and the whatever hats, whatever it is, we can ship a pallet, mixed pallet, right? It's pretty cool.
So are you shipping once you get those products? Sometimes you're doing some value add, adding tags or putting them in different packaging or whatever. Are you also shipping? Are you shipping again by boat, or are you doing over the road?
That's the good point of Panama. You can use whatever is available: LTL, FCL, LCL. It will depends on the urgency. It will depends on the volume. Sometimes we ship air.
Yep. When you also, I know you also support the Caribbean, so obviously those are all by ocean.
Yeah. By road, we can only serve Central America, meaning Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. Those are the main areas we serve by
say
road.
that again slower, man.
Sorry for that. Costa Rica and Nicaragua are probably the main served markets by road because it's 48 hours. Then we serve Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. Even though some companies have service all over from Panama to Mexico, that would take longer. And we advise our customers, depending on the value of the goods, depending on the type of goods, to send it by boat or send it by truck. It will depend how many borders they need to cross. So there are some factors we advise the customer, because typically they will say, okay, give me the lowest cost and the bigger volume. Okay, hold on. It will depend on if the product is more interesting or not, the value, the condition, the fragile. So there are some factors we take into consideration to advise our customer how to ship. Because they say typically, whatever the customer asks for, say, okay, hold on, you will have this in this situation. That we became more advisors of our customers to find the best way to serve. And of course, if we can do it in the lowest and a bigger volume cost, for them will be good. Yeah, that's what we do. Sometimes we do our own console boxes for our customers, because due to the fact that we have, let's say, a typically week in IPL, we have 4 or 5 customers shipping LCL products to the Dominican Republic. Even though we are not selling a console service, we create our own console box with our own customers, so we can have control, and then we ship to the Dominican Republic. We have a good partner there. They then make all the customs part and they distribute locally. So this is the kind of things we do, mainly for our internal customers. We don't sell it much.
Yep. And again, I think this local knowledge, it's hard to sell to a country that you don't do business with on a regular basis. You mentioned Nicaragua. If you're selling to them and you say, I'm responsible for a whole region, how do I know what's going on day to day in that country and what new Fed regs they have? But also, not only do we have to comply to regulations, we have to comply to customer standards. So those, they keep changing. And again, think about it, it's the same here in the United States. When you say, oh, it's September, we're starting to see winter clothes move here. But it's all down there, they have different weather and in the region. It's a big region. So
it's a pretty big region, yeah.
So as one is hitting one weather, the other's hitting another. And let me throw out one other thing. The challenge with some of those smaller markets of trying to serve them, you mentioned the shoes again, is if your shoes start selling really well in one place but not another, and you don't want to carry a ton of inventory because you can't easily move it from one country to another. But if you store it with IPL Group and say, hey, my inventory is relatively close to my customers, and I'll let Demo and the IPL group manage the inventory, just like I would do with the DC here in the United States for my customers here.
The main thing we try to teach our customers, Joe, is to think on regional inventories instead of market inventories. Sometimes they, okay, I will bring these shoes and these are for Colombia. Not always happen. Markets change. Tomorrow, a TikToker will send whatever video and that will hit. That happens, right? And then a market booms with the product. So they need the product. If you have that product in another country, re-export it between countries, at least in this region, is pretty hard in time and cost and in processes. But if you have your product under this realized inventory concept, then you can just move it away because you have all the connectivity, all the services, all the availability, and then you can react to that specific market change. Something happened, move it. If, for example, let's use the case of Colombia, it's a big market, right? 55 million people there. Whatever you plan to that country could be affected by any political situation or any weather or anything like that. So you have this inventory. Okay, but you know what? Let's say Guatemala is doing great. Sell it to Guatemala or sell it to the Dominican Republic or sell it to Peru. Flexibility now is the name of the game. Regionalized inventory give you flexibility to sell.
Yep. I want to be able to minimize the bad decisions. And so if as long as I can have inventory close to the customer, I'm going to be okay. As soon as I make a decision though that I'm going to send shoes to this region, I no longer have flexibility. So if I say I made a big buy, send all this to Nicaragua, and then they don't sell, I can't easily move them. I can't say, oh, I'll just have Demo pick them up and move them to Colombia. It just doesn't work that way.
So, yeah, you're killed. If you do that, taxes and the processes will kill you. I have seen many times companies losing lots of money for doing that. And
I think what it comes down to, I always say this, you need a partner. You need a partner who understands the region. You live in the region. You serve the region every day. The rest of us are, I talk to you every year or so, and that's my exposure to Latin America market. I deal with people in Colombia on a regular basis because they work with us, but it's not easy to manage this. This is why you need a partner in Panama, like IPL Group. So I want to talk about the CHIPS Act. The other day before we did this podcast, we talked a little bit about the CHIPS Act. So that's the CHIP, not ships, CHIPS. And it's that initiative to build chips here in the United States, but not just in the United States. So talk a little bit about that. That's a U.S. act.
Yeah, this act mainly tried to have other countries involved on this initiative. And the countries that the U.S. government picked for this were Mexico, Panama, and Costa Rica. Panama is inside the CHIPS Act mainly for its logistics advocacy, right? For the logistic and supply chain benefits for the industry of chips. That not necessarily means that we will have a fab here, as they call it, manufacturing plants of chips, semiconductor plants, because those are pretty expensive and requires a lot of resources that probably don't have. We definitely can serve a part of those smaller required manufacturing points or the industries or the vendors that serve the industry. Actually, there are many companies that serve the semiconductor industry very interested in Panama. So it's these days a lot of noise and a lot of missions coming and universities collaborating with Panama on this, and basically Arizona State University, Purdue, and others from the Netherlands working together with national universities to form engineers that are required for serving the semiconductor industry. The other countries, like Costa Rica and Mexico, are doing the same. Mexico probably will be more focused on manufacturing. Costa Rica also part of manufacturing testing. Panama will be focused again on supply chain parts, testing and repackaging. Every country have its own thing, right? Its own part to add to this act and support the initiative.
Yep. So it's interesting because the CHIPS Act it's very specific, nearshoring about the chips technology, the silicon chips. But we're going to see other initiatives like this because there is Right now, China does not have a cost advantage over, say, Mexico labor. So a lot of stuff is moving, automotive stuff is moving from China to Mexico. And in some cases, the Chinese companies are opening up in Mexico to serve US companies. And some of that's going to happen, and that's great. Again, I think this makes a lot of sense. And I think also the United States is also looking and saying strategically, what should we build in the US? What should we also build regionally with our partners? I've spent a lot of time in Asia in the past, and when I was still working in automotive. It's difficult. It's 12-hour time difference, different cultures, different languages. Now, when we move back and start working with Latin America, as we are doing more of, usually same time zone. You're in Central time zone. I'm in the Eastern time zone. That's easy. I also culturally, I can fly from, how long if I was, let's just say in Chicago, I know you're in the US a lot. If I wanted to fly from Chicago to Panama, how long does that take?
I think it's 5 hours.
Okay, so it's not much worse than going to California.
California is 7.5 hours. No, sorry, 6.5 hours.
Okay, so it's
direct flight from Panama, actually.
Yeah. No, I know there's always direct flights. In fact, one of my daughters was going on a trip and she says, "Should I go to Panama?" I go, "Yes, I would." I haven't been there yet, but I know of it. And people go right to Costa Rica, very close to you, right? So as we are doing this nearshoring, we are starting to look at who should we partner with. Again, I think there's going to be, I think we learned during COVID when the U.S. quickly realized, oh, we don't make our own PPE, so I can't get personal protection equipment. Maybe, just maybe, some of this stuff should be made here. And if not here, in Mexico or in somewhere in Latin America. The ties are also here. Also, I don't know what percentage of Americans are Hispanic, but I think it's 15-20% of the population. A lot of the people here speak Spanish. It is culturally a little easier. The flights are easier. The cultural differences are fewer. And again, you're in region, same time zones.
Yeah. And we're seeing more and more also companies from Asia also trying to be here just to serve that market. As you said, not only Mexico, but the rest of Latin America. You're seeing some initiative from manufacturing and to be here to do logistics. Many companies from Asia doing some logistics here. So it's pretty interesting.
Yep. And one other thing I want to talk to you about is, and we've talked about this not so much on the podcast, but on the phone. We'd like to think, oh, Latin America, we think, or South America, Central America, that they have all of their trade relationships figured out. They don't, not yet. So it'd be great if I could say, oh, I can serve Latin America, which would include Mexico, Central America, South America, with the same product. I can't. And they don't necessarily have the equivalent of NAFTA down there, which makes it a lot harder. And I'm hoping that over time we get those to happen. We have a lot of different governments down there, a lot of different economic systems. You were telling me the other day, a number of countries in the region are communist. And we saw what happened with Venezuela. You don't no longer trade very much with communist countries because they don't have anything to trade.
Yeah, that's the hard part. Yeah.
So my hope is that as we partner with Latin American companies, that we get those trade relationships straightened out. And again, it's not easy. It takes forever to get these things done. We still are going on. That's a never-ending journey, but that makes it a lot easier to say, yeah, we're going to work in region because we have already straightened out all of the tariffs and that. Because sometimes it can be very difficult, which again, one of the reasons you need IPL group, because they understand all the crazy tariffs.
Yeah, and typically our customers, of course, they have partners, they have customers, they get some feedback, they come to us, then we go back and talk with those partners in those countries, and then we figured out how to serve and how to give those services to serve those markets. So it's a very ongoing communication between all the parties involved. That's why we don't only give logistic services. We do a lot of advice to customers, lots of consultation, let's say, support, just to help them to reach their sales goals.
Yep. So before I forget, I wanted to talk about this in the beginning. CSCMP Nashville. you are a new board member of CSCMP. So please talk about that.
I have been in the board since last year, the end of last year. I became the global growth member. My responsibility is to serve Latin America and the Caribbean. And my job is to help members across the region to come together and build roundtables, just for these professionals to join and use the power of the association and network and do business and create and growth professionally. But yeah, CSMP for me, I've been a member for I believe 15 years now. So they honored me with this position, with this job, and yeah, it's something that I enjoy a lot. The connection with the academia for me is the most interesting part because me, I love teaching, and I am very well connected with many U.S. based universities that teaches supply chain. I know pretty much all the professors that are in this particular field interested in Latin America, so they come. So we have a very nice exchange of information, students, teachings, lessons. It's very nice.
Yeah, I seem to remember you were involved with some professors. Was it Georgia?
Yeah, many. Ohio State, Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, Penn State, Purdue, you name it.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So the CSCMP, which by the way, that stands for Council of Supply Chain
Management professionals.
Management Professionals. They are having an event in a few weeks. Please talk about that event.
We have our biggest event of the year. It's called Edge 24. I will be in Nashville, Tennessee at the Gaylord Resort. Very cool event. We will be there by 3 or 4 days. This event is, again, first part of the event is called the ARS, the Academic Research Symposium, where all these professors from not only from the US, from all over the world come and they get trained, they present doctoral studies, and all this is very interesting from the academic standpoint. And then that's on the weekend. And then on Monday, we start sessions. It's a regular event, supply chain event, but we got very cool speakers. We get together, we have board meetings and a lot of case studies. And what I love again from CSCMP is that mix between academia and the industry. Every session is mainly composed by 2 or 3 members, 2 from the academia, 1 from the industry, 1 from the industry, 2 from the academia. So it's very the ties between both areas. That's what it's for me the biggest value, because you can put together what is going on in the market with what these universities and these schools are teaching, so we can have those professionals involved. Cool thing this year is my son is joining. He's a young professional, and he's joining to CSCMP Edge first time, so he's coming.
Excellent, excellent. That's so CSCMP Nashville or CSCMP Edge is in Nashville. And when is that?
It's on December 29 to September 29 to October the 2nd. I will be in Nashville, Tennessee this year.
That'll be perfect.
Yeah.
Be beautiful weather there. I'm going to wrap this bad boy up. Then I'm going to get your final thoughts on the topic, Demo. I'm talking to my friend Demo Perez, and we're talking about Panama, the logistics engine of Latin America. We talked a little bit about the history of Panama and its long ties to the United States. We talked about the Canal, one of the biggest engineering projects in history. And we talked a little bit about the water level. The water level was down for a while. It is back. Ships are flowing through. Keep your fingers crossed. Say your prayers. The water level's back, and Panama is looking into ways to make sure it continues to stay at a high water level so we can move all of our goods through that wonderful canal. And now we're talking about the CHIPS Act, which is not only the United States, but also some of our trading partners in the region, Mexico, Costa Rica, and Panama being really largely responsible for the supply chain and logistics end of that for the nearshoring chips back to this region. And am I missing anything? I don't think so. Oh, one last thing. You want to work with the IPL group? Demo is one of the founders of that group. So you do want, if you're doing business in that region and you're trying to do it from the United States, you're trying to do it from Asia, you're trying to do it from Europe, you really, truly are missing something. You're missing a partner in the region who lives it every day. And whether it's, I, of course, would pick IPL Group, but there's lots of other great companies down there that also have that local knowledge. So, Demo, put a big old bow on this one. Final thoughts on the topic.
The first thing we believe we add value is to just let companies know what they can do. Right? Many companies doesn't know what they can do using Panama platform as their pivot point to serve the Latin American countries. Companies like executive and colleagues can reach out to us just to learn. We love to teach on this. It doesn't necessarily need to drive into work with us, but we want to spread the word about these benefits because they are there. We don't need to invent the wheel. We don't need to add anything new. It's there. Legislation, tax benefits, logistics are there. Just learning how to use it, that's the key point here.
Yep. And I know, Demo, you're always open to conversations. And I really do. I'm not just saying this to be nice. You are a great ambassador for logistics partnership in Panama. I know you spent a lot of time in the U.S. as you're going to be here for this event in Nashville in a few weeks. And I do think it's always interesting to talk to you because I think as we want to sell more to Latin America, everybody wants to sell more into that region. And it's not easy yet. I think everybody's thought, oh, we'll just do nearshoring. Nearshoring is going to take decades. It took us decades to spread our supply chain out. And for the most part, when we said out, we're going to send that out to somewhere else, outsourcing, it was largely just to China. It took us decades to figure out how to deal with China. And it's going to take us decades to dismantle some of that. We're not going to dismantle all of it, hopefully. But as we grow into this region, it's going to be challenging, just like it was. And we're going to need partners down there. So I appreciate you being such a great ambassador for the region.
I love that, man. And that's here where I live. And I've been many years in the industry. Yeah, happy to connect with people that need some ideas or advice on this. Reach out to us and happy to be here, my man.
Thank you. What I'll do, Demo, is I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, and any other links you and your marketing team give me. I'll put them in the show notes. And thanks again, old friend.
Okay. Thank you to the audience. And Joe, I hope to see you soon.
Yeah. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.